everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today on this day, I have with me a gentleman by the name of Cornell Ellis. He is the executive director of BLOC, Brothers Liberating Our Communities, which is an organization that focuses on sustaining and keeping brothers in education, which is a dilemma that I don't think people are really aware of, that we're still struggling with to this day. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about the work that his organization does. But first and foremost, as I always do, I take a quick moment to pause, say thank you to you, sir, for making time for me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we cannot get it back. So I truly appreciate you setting aside this time in your day to sit down and chat with little old me. And with that, sir, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Shout out to all the people out there listening. It's such an important cause to support our Black creators and our Black artists. And Lana, I'm so happy to be here, just sitting down and having a conversation about the future is what we're talking about.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off by getting myself in some trouble. Okay. I don't know if most people know, so we're going to put it out there. Black men make up just 2% of the population of educators. And we were talking about that before we got started, but brothers make up 2% of teachers in the United States. I have long held the belief, and this is tricky, let me see if I phrase this correctly. I have long held the belief that some things, some areas of life, Black people, we were just excelling at before desegregation, right? So in 1954, we had 82,000 Black teachers. And then Brown versus Board of Education comes along, and it's supposed to be this wonderful opportunity that, gives us equality and opens doors for us. And then we saw it dropped down to 40,000. So I was wondering if you could explain to the audience, because people might not understand like why that happened, how that happened, because it was supposed to be a wonderful thing for us, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. It
so
was.
Explain why we lost so many teachers.
That was the narrative, right? And I appreciate you starting there because I teach history, so I consider myself to be kind of an amateur historian, and these are things that I have sought out in my journey in education to have answers for. There's a couple of great books, Black Teachers on Teaching. There's a podcast called After 1954 that I've been really delved in. That's really great. But it really does a great job of explaining and thinking about the experiences that Black teachers had after Brown versus Board. Even from the start of Brown versus Board, right, this narrative of what we were seeking, or kind of like what was the goal, was one that was a little bit misnomered and a little bit misunderstood, right? Like we were seeking equity in resources, right? Not equity in like what they sought to be quality education, right? And so when we get this idea of like, well, the Black people got equity because they got to come to our schools, right? The Black people got equity because they got to get taught by our teachers, right? Which was pretty much the modicum of how deseg happened. They closed Black schools, and with the closing of Black schools, they selected very few Black teachers from each school to then come over to the white schools to be able to teach the mixed classes, right? And then in Black Teachers on Teaching, you really start to hear a lot of these personal narratives of Black teachers that experience like sitting in the break room all day, right? Who aren't even allowed to teach white kids, right? They aren't allowed to teach these mixed classrooms because there's white kids in them. And so even the teachers that are selected to continue, the small percentage, like you said, from 80,000 to 40,000 that are selected to continue on in education at these new schools, the schools that remain open, shall I say, those schools those teachers aren't given the opportunities to really teach. And so after a while, right, we start talking about retention and sustainment and how that has an impact on an educator's mindset, has an impact on an educator's purpose, right? If I'm just sitting here playing cards all day, am I really doing what I am called to do? Or what I was, what my job description says even, right? We're not even talking about what I'm passionate about or God's purpose. I'm just trying to fulfill a job, right? And sometimes. And so, yeah, that experience was one that alienated Black cultures from education, right? And so even today in the barbershop, I have a conversation and somebody will make an offhanded comment like, Black people don't care about school, right? And it's like, that comment is rooted in a lot of history and context, right? Like, let's be really careful about, like, are you wrong? Like, we don't want to have to go, like, I don't like doing right or wrong, right? But we can talk about why you can be both, right? And why you can, like, be more careful about the words that you choose when we talk about our communities, right? Because as an educator, I've seen, right, and had conversations with other educators where morals and ethics that go on at home are not necessarily what you would like to see morals and ethics are perpetuated at school, right? Or they're not all, we don't always align with parents, right? And what we want kids to be doing. But we have to acknowledge that there is a larger play at hand here, right? That's been happening for decades, right? Generational, cyclical poverty that has disenfranchised and disinvested whole communities and groups of people from the education process, right? And in order to rebuild that, reimagine that, reinvest in that, it takes twice the amount of time, right? What they say, when you break up with somebody and you was with them for a year, it take you 2 years to get over them. Well, when we, were traumatized and severed from schools and communities, and subsequently to that, we had the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which we know were not great for us, right? Now we start looking at mass incarceration of people of color and how that is distributing among the economic and educational community. And now we look at ourselves in 2000 and 2020, right? We have to see ourselves in this context, right? I teach kids that were born in the years that I graduated from high school, and they can't see past 1990, right? They think 1990 was so long ago, right? Like, no, fam, like, your parents are that old, and like, you have grandparents that were 20 years younger than that, like, so we have to start thinking about things in more of a longitudinal manner. I know society, capitalism gets us very used to immediate gratification, right? And that's the kind of unlearning that we have to fight back against in order to rebuild our communities centered around the same educational practices and values and moralities that we once had. We've been fighting for school since been pimping, right? We've been sneaking to read since we got here. You know what I mean? The first thing we did when we got free was build schools. It's the first thing we did, schools and churches, right? And so we have to get back to that, and we have to unlearn. First, we have to realize and recognize what's being done to us. And then secondarily, unlearn the symptoms that the policies and procedures that have given us, right, to be able to get back to, what we've known.
One house schoolrooms, we see pictures of that. Now, kind of unpacking a lot of stuff that you just said, talking about as a Black community, stuff that we have to unlearn, the systemic stuff that we have to realize. As a Black male educator walking into a classroom, most of the time, the reality is you guys are walking into classrooms that are filled with minority students. So you intrinsically have a understanding. You kind of, I know what you're experiencing. I know what you went through. I went through it. I'm wondering, since you bring that element to the classroom as a Black male educator, how easy is it for you to incorporate your experiences when it comes to school administration policies and procedures or whatever? Are you able to do what you're capable of doing in the classroom when you have minority students?
So I hear two questions there, right? Like, am I able to assert my identity inside of a classroom and with students? And am I able to assert my identity in an administrative office with policies at the board level or at the state level and law level, right?
And be effective to the students. I mean, because you bring such an asset,
Mhm. Well, definitely to the students, right? I was just having a conversation with the school district earlier this morning where I explained to them, like, every time I get in front of students, it's an advertising opportunity for education. Kids didn't know teachers could look like this, talk like this, dress like this, walk like this, talk like this, maybe because they've literally never seen one, or maybe because they've only seen one type, right? Maybe they've only seen one guy that wasn't me, right? And so it's important that not only kids get to see a diverse representation of different ethnicities and different cultures, but they also get to see a representation diverse inside of those ethnicities and cultures, right? There's Black men that like math. I can't stand numbers. There's Black men that do anime, right? I'd much rather go outside and throw a football, right? There's lots of different intersections. And when you get in a room full of Black men, you start talking about that, right? How are me and this guy different? Even though we here because we have a common identity, there's a lot below the surface, right? The iceberg under the surface that actually creates different layers of intersectionality, right, for our identity, right? And so when I'm working with students, it's imperative that you bring that identity to your classroom. And it's fairly easy. I think I speak for myself, who's a mildly experienced educator. I've been in the classroom for over a decade. So I have a relative rapport with students, right? No matter what building I walk into, they be looking, who is that, right? Y'all should just pay me to walk around in a suit jacket, right? Because some of these little Black boys in kindergarten come up and hug me unprompted. They just want some love. And they tired of getting hugs from with hair in their face. With tired of getting hugs from Ugg boots. You know what I mean? I got Ugg boots. Let me stop playing. But this idea of like when they see somebody that's like, oh my God, he looked like my uncle. You talk like my cousin, right? Like we are cousins. Matter of fact, we found out. You never know. On town I'm from, we just not that far apart. So just this idea of the ways and different modalities, teaching history, right? You bring your experiences into the classroom and allow students to be more engaged, more attracted to the curriculum, more relevancy. Gloria Ladson-Billings calls it culturally relevant pedagogy, right? Where we are relevant with our students in such a way that we have cultural, linguistic, and experiential similarities to our students where, nigga, I go to the same BP down the street that you go to, right? You've been to that BP before, right? You go to that BP, you've been a homeboy around out to take your dollar, right? The vending machine, you know that vending machine don't work, right? Right. And so these types of micro interactions, micro moments, right, start to build trust, community, and a classroom that is more effective in the end. On the other side of that question, when we talk about like administrative policy, board level, it's not as easy because these are more white dominant spaces, right? Where we talk about like disenfranchised communities over generations, which means that like 90% of boards across America are white, right? So like, we yell at principals and superintendents be sliding under the radar, right? We yell at teachers, we yell at principals, right? We may send a letter to the superintendent if you can get a hold of them, but it's really these boards that are making decisions for school districts, for students and communities. And most of them are people you've never heard of, you didn't show up to vote for, right? Because you didn't see their campaign, and they don't live where you live, right? They're probably in the community that's a small sect of your district, and they have students that may not even live in your district, right? Let's be honest, but they have a vested interest in the community, right? And they want to see benefits in their local school district, right? So as the layman's, right, as people, right, I went to a private high school, so I have a lot of privilege as a Black male. I have to be fully aware of, as a male, privilege I step into spaces, as a privately educated and college educated, I have to understand that privilege I step into. We have to understand that some people haven't experienced those privileges. And so we need to be working alongside those that have spaces to grow in some areas that I don't, right? So if I do a good job at being informed about the upcoming school board, I need to go to my homies that are good at other things, but aren't so good at keeping up at legislation and we can have a conversation about what they want and how they see their community going for their children and how we can make that happen on a policy level, right? And so it's important that we are catching up communities to, like we talk about equity, right? Every community
Yes.
what they need, catching up communities to be at a level where they're fully informed. My buddy was just saying this the other day. We may, and then even after we elect people, right? We elect people and then we say, all right, go do your job, right? But it's actually up to us to continue to write and propose policies for those elected officials to then bring to the state house and get passed, right? So there's a whole disconnect. Talk about disenfranchised education. We don't even teach kids about the democratic process, right? I still don't understand Senate and Congress and House of Representatives.
Yeah.
Which one I'm voting for now and when, and like that's disenfranchisement, right? That's purposeful.
A lack of understanding. Yes,
right?
yes.
Absolutely. So if we can help get people to that space where they feel informed and they feel like they have some agency, we can start looking at these boards and start thinking about how we can dismantle some of these policy level issues or policy level drivers that are affecting our kids on a daily basis that we don't even get to, right? We want to yell at the principal, but the principal is following a policy from the superintendent. The superintendent got passed from the board, right? And that we didn't show up to the board meeting to vote on.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this concept of school board, and let me make it a little relatable here. I did a Google search real quick. You're in Missouri, and there's a city or a county or whatever, Ladue or whatever, right?
Yeah, that's in St. Louis, yeah.
And I think it was like 83% white, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let me propose the scenario for you. Let's say you got a brother who just graduated from college, top of his class, has passed all of his tests, got a certificate, top of his class.
In the education school?
Education school, okay? He and his resume is banging, like he legit. Sure. And he says, I want me a good paying job, so I'm going to go apply at the Ladue school. What, you're already shaking your head? Not gonna happen. What?
You said 3 words in education that don't go together: good paying job and education. Now, is that where you were going with this question? I'll let you finish your question. Is that where you were going?
I'm going to apply at the Ladue School Board. I want a job there. Can I get a job there?
Yeah, absolutely. Is it going to pay you what your value is? Probably not.
Why not?
Again, policy. This is, and even above policy, though, there's a larger conversation about culture in education and patriarchy. Now that we're here, really enjoy the Male Perspective podcast, right? But like I said, showing up in spaces where I'm aware of my privilege. And as a male, right, in education spaces, I'm often one of the only. And so therefore I do have privileges that especially my sisters, Black sisters, don't enjoy, right? In certain ways, right? We have different privileges, but I think that it's important for us to, wait, I lost my train of thought. What was, money. Okay.
I forget no money, you can't lose no train of thought.
Right. Policy. And so as males, right, I often am able to get promoted maybe a little bit faster and able to get a little bit of a pay jump a little bit faster. I think there's other conversation about compensation when it comes to the different roles that Black males face, not only within the school, but outside of it, right? So my roles and my work specifically with Black men is unique because like Black men are often the head of household, right? And so when we talk about this young man in your hypothetical situation, he may have children, he may not. He may have a mother, probably, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, people that immediate and not, that he may be helping take care of, right? And even if in that case, like I never had anybody I was taking care of, but I knew my mama had to pay her own mortgage, right? And so I had a very limited budget on what I was able to have access to, right?
Mhm.
And when you graduate from college, possibly with debt, and you look at a paycheck with $38,000 on it, right? It's yearly, right? And so I was there, right? I got out my first job, and your paycheck is every 2 weeks less than $1,000. It's like 700, 700, 800 bucks. It can be pretty tough. But okay, the culture, though, of education is one that in America has built it up to be a women's work, right? And so we come back to this idea of patriarchy and the privileges that I step in spaces. Teaching is underpaid because women are undervalued, right?
Mhm.
Teaching is like a non-sustainable profession because education is deemed as like babysitting in our culture.
Mhm.
It's not a profession that has reverence or a profession that has value, or even a profession that's like well sought out. So when you were describing this hypothetical, highly achieving Black male, highly functioning, highly achieving Black male, that brother ain't going into education. That brother going to be an engineer somewhere. He's going to
Gotcha.
be in policy somewhere. He's going to work for the government somewhere, right? And so, especially with being a Black male, you're a hot commodity in every industry because we're rare everywhere because most of us are in jail. So anywhere that we want to go, we can get work, get paid, get promoted to a certain level.
Gotcha.
And it's definitely not going to be education because I don't want to work with white women. 85% of educators are white women, right? So why would I spend most of my time in a space where I'm probably being like low-key harassed, and definitely oppressed in certain ways, right? That white dominant culture is very like nuanced inside of education, right? So like as a teacher, I'm experiencing trauma as a secondary student, right? Like second time, and as a teacher. I gotta say what to this kid, right? I gotta teach what, right? Like as an educator, right? Like I have a unique experience. So a lot of brothers is like, I'm not about to put up with that madness. I'm not about to teach that crap. You know what I mean? I can go be a mentor somewhere, right? And I can go work with kids being a coach.
Gotcha.
I get a lot of Black men that say, you want to coach? Well, come on in and teach algebra. You're an accountant. What's it to teach the slope formula, bro? The kids will love you, And that's the conversation that just some Black men need a little bit of a push.
Gotcha. I want to, because you mentioned that teaching is a female, still tends to be a female career, but then you also said that it's still predominantly a white female career field. Why is it still predominantly white women run around teaching our schools?
Well, when I hear that question, I think about why white women, why are they choosing it? And I think about why not everybody else. And don't get me wrong, Black women aren't out here teaching. Don't get me wrong. Black women are doing great work in education. Recent studies that just came out was like Black women are the most highly educated subgroup in America, right? So tons of, and that's why I'm kind of alluded to earlier, right? Like Black men and Black women have different privileges inside of education. Gotcha. And that's like that's a whole nother show. We got a whole nother 30 minutes to have to talk about Black men and Black women and how they engage in classrooms and in school buildings. But I think the short answer to your question is savior complex, right? Like, like when you think about like white womanhood and the history of white womanhood in America, that is dangerous, first of all, and secondarily, charitable, right? I think is the best word to describe it. How can we have pity on and kind of save those that need us, right?
I've done my good work for the day.
Right, absolutely. So it's that. And I think the second thing is they can afford it because they married to white racist men who are doctors and lawyers and engineers. And so who can afford $38,000 a year? They can, right? Because they have marriages that allow them to not be the primary breadwinner.
Gotcha. And then for the record, let's get, you mentioned 38,000 a year. About how much of that is coming out of your pocket to pay to fund your classroom throughout the year?
It depends on your topic.
Okay.
Right. It depends on your topic. I don't want to like sit here and throw a blanket number at it, because my art teachers out there struggling, right? My English teachers, I taught English. We buy a book or two.
Okay.
Pencils, if we need them. I see a lot of paper being bought because the school's budget for printing and stuff is not adequate often. A lot of times printing in color can be a real difficulty in schools. That's just another like budget thing. And so you see a lot of teachers, if they want to put something pretty in their classroom or build their space, they're paying for that pretty much out of pocket. So elementary school teachers out there, they got a little bit more cost also. As a high school, middle school teacher, that wasn't my forte. I got some student work up in here. That didn't cost me nothing.
It's so heartbreaking that, here it is. This is my income to pay my rent, my groceries or whatever. And I got to turn around and invest that back into, it's just so heartbreaking. But let me get back on track here. So we're talking about getting my brothers to pursue the field of education. And before we started filming today, you did say that it's about 50% of you guys that actually do pursue education as a career field, right? But we want more of you guys to do that. So what are some things that we can do collectively as a community society to make that happen?
Well, I think when you hear about local legislation that increases the salary of educators, hop on that stuff, right? I was being hot earlier around civic engagement, right? A lot of these things don't change, let's say change at the policy and law level. So if you can write letters to your state representatives, your governors, in support for your educators, talking to your teachers and your principals ain't doing nothing. They're also in service of a superintendent who's also just trying not to lose his job. Superintendents are the most revolving door positions in education, right? If you want to talk to somebody about your student achievement, talk to your principal. If you want to talk to somebody about the district overall in the community, talk to your board. Leave your superintendent out of it. Find a board member that you have access to, okay? And so along those lines, write policies or suggest policies that increase salaries and then increase diversity intentionally, right? Ask your representatives, what's the demographics of our educators? How many of our students are white? Our teachers are white, Black, Latino. How many of our educators match those demographics? Where are we least represented? What's our graduation numbers looking like? What's our discipline data looking like? The best parent and the best community member is an informed one, and the one that's all up in these elected officials' asses, because that's their job, right? Yeah. I want to know all of it, and I'll be at the next meeting to talk publicly about it, right? About these issues. And if that's kind of the attitude that we take to educational change, and it's not just like, I'm gonna email your teacher can't do nothing, right? Let's figure out the other access points that are gonna be most effective and leverageable. So that will help increase Black men. Look for local organizations that are doing this work. I can guarantee you're in LA right now, I can name 2 organizations, gentlemen. Kingmakers of Oakland, I know is out there. That's in Oakland, but North Cali. I think they may have a South Cali chapter too. The Black Teacher Project is also in North California. And I know there's organizations in your local area that are working on Black teacher support. Donate to them, right? Find their website to give them $5. Just $5, like we were saying earlier, that can buy a pack of pencils. And that money goes directly into Black male educators and Black educators' pockets through a lot of these organizations, through programs. So take the time to be able to do the research on legislation, on organizations, right? And I would say probably the third thing is just one thing you can do is thank your local educators, right? So send an email to you. If you're gonna email your kid's teacher, thank them. Because they've been dealing with a lot over these last 3 years. It's been tough. And I left the classroom full time in 2019, spring of 2019, like when it all hit the fan. We left for spring break and we never went back. And I took a job at a local organization giving out food. I worked to feed families.
Still a servant.
Had to. It wasn't English and reading that our students needed at that time. It was sustenance.
Yeah.
It was, my mom can't go to work. We can't pay the rent. The lights are off. I know kids that ain't got nothing but a microwave in their house. Like families of 5, 6. And they got a car so they can get to where they want to go, but like they got a car payment and they got a house payment. And the lights usually get cut off every third month because cash flow issues,
Money funny.
And these kids are looking for, like, I'm a coach, so I see these kids on an athletic sense. Where these are kids that we're in at the end of school, we're asking them to come out and do athletic things. Throughout the whole day, we're asking them to do academic things. And they haven't had nothing but ramen for the last 24 hours.
I can't concentrate on this because I'm hungry. My stomach is grumbling.
I'm hungry.
And let me ask you, because we've been talking of, you were mentioning we need to get politically involved in our superintendents and stuff like that. But when it comes to our communities and what you're seeing, because you're actively in it, how aware are we of what we need to do? I mean, because we've got other issues just to survive the day.
Right.
Our community given the tools to have the information and knowledge that we need to make an effective change in the schools in our community? Are we given the resources? Are parents given the resources?
No.
So where's the change going to, how is this?
So I think that goes on with that second prong of doing research around community organizations. There's a local organization here that does a great job at community information, right? Yeah, community engagement. Like they have a website, like everything is at the website if you can just get there, right? But we're also still talking about access to internet or access to a computer a lot of times. But I think at the root cause of what you're talking about here, and like this is like a in this season of my life, I'm thinking a lot about this concept of rest, right? And we talk about capitalism, like ever since we were slaves, right? This idea of like it was their job it was white dominant culture's job to work Black folks until they couldn't live anymore, right? Like we were a human experiment. Like how little water can you take? How little food can you take? How long can you work, right? The sugarcane fields, once the sugarcane field becomes ripe, you have 24 hours to get it down and turned into sugar before it's no longer good, before it rots, right? And so we're talking about 24-hour shifts on a lot of these Caribbean plantations, these labor-intensive plantations, right? And so capitalism ain't no different. Now we have families and mothers that go from one job to a second job to pick up kids, to drop them off, to go to a third job in order so that they could just eat this weekend.
That's right.
Right? And the system is designed for us to be in motion so much for survival that we can't even stop to think about how we are being bamboozled, right? And we turn over our children to the education system because we trust the system to create people that are better than ourselves. Didn't your parents do that also? Didn't your parents turn you over to a classroom and to a teacher that hated you? That wanted to see nothing but see you destroyed. Let's be honest. Let's not stop sugarcoating this shit, right? These teachers see nothing. These people want to see nothing but us destroyed. Why would you hand over your deer to the lions for education? Right?
True.
So we have to start to unlearn this concept of overwork first. We have to find some of that faith and hope that God gonna take care of us when we doing the right thing. You know, I know it's not easy for us to, for me to sit back as an executive director and say these things, right? But I still live in a 975-foot square house, barely paying rent too. I'm running a nonprofit, y'all. I ain't rich. I ain't rich, y'all. But I'm not going to, I'll take naps when I need to. I say no when I need to, right? I won't give my body to a system that doesn't want to do anything for me, right? And so I do what I need to in order to be engaged, right? And so whether that be take a day off to get to vote, whether that be spending your bath time reading a couple articles about local legislative officials, whether that be taking one day a week to email your local school board members, whether that be sending a thank you basket to your teachers, to your kids' teachers, right? There's so many little things that one can do to contribute to the betterment of the educational ecosystem. It takes a little bit of outside the box thinking, and it takes a little bit of revolutionary grit, right? Revolutionary elbow grease. We have to fight back against our initial gut reaction. I gotta go to work. I gotta pay rent. I gotta. No, you don't. You really don't.
Sit still for a second. Sit still.
You really don't. Like, what happens if you don't? Like, you lose your job, I guess, right? Like, in this idea of like, there's another job out there where you probably have talent in some way that you could be cultivating instead of working for someone else's outcomes, right? And these are all revolutionary ideas. Somebody out there listening to this saying, this Negro is tripping. I'm on my way to work right now.
I think, the working climate has shifted, especially from our great grandparents' days. Right. You know what I'm saying? Okay, right. You had to go to the factory and get a good paying job, but today's world, especially with technology and the internet, there's so many more income bearing jobs out there or careers that you create that will allow you to rest. And I think that's one of the things that we as Black folks, as you said, we've never had an opportunity to mentally rest. I say this all the time. We came out of enslavement, and he said, hey, y'all have a nice day, and nobody
good luck.
Hey, do I get a coupon for a spa treatment? Or like,
and actually you better hurry up too, because you look lazy.
Let me talk about some of the wonderful stuff that BLOC is doing. One of the programs that I saw you have there is Liberation Leadership Lab. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we probably had like 5 programs up and running this year. When I founded this thing, our first program was block building. That's just like our monthly meetups, professional development. We have a fellowship that we launched this year where we bring in guys that are in their first 7 years of education to go through a 2-year growth and learning experience where they get $12,000 to obtain their next degree on the block. The Liberation Leadership is kind of the next step of that. How are we taking the really experienced educators, right? Like principals, school leaders, using their expertise to not only provide professional development for block building that I just aforementioned, but also for the program for the fellowship, right? That they're mentors, they provide experience, and they provide like direct support for a lot of these young men, right? The research says that groupers have a more positive educational experience, right? This idea of groupers is Black male educators that are able to work in the same building or work on the same team or be hired in the same school district, right? But just this transferable idea of like groups of us are healthier environments for me to feel sustained and for me to feel like this work is something I can continue doing, right? So mentorships and instructional coaches that are affinity-based are some of our main pieces of core programming. And that liberatory leadership piece, right? Change starts from the top, right? So like I said, if you want to talk about your kids' outcomes, you want to talk about a teacher that you have, if you're a parent out there and you have an issue with a teacher, talk to the principal. If you have an issue with the principal, talk to the superintendent. Your issue with the superintendent, well, I say again, leave the superintendent out of it. You got an issue with principal, talk to the board, right?
Okay.
Superintendents.
We got to get that message out there. Everybody needs to start knocking on the school board's door. Hey,
Go
hey,
find the
hey,
school
hey,
board.
hey. Okay.
Go find the school board.
Okay.
Out there in LA County, the city council I've been hearing about. The city council.
Oh, yes. Oh,
yes.
That's a whole nother hour conversation there.
But that's the same concept, though. A lot of these people may not be that notable until they mess up, right? They may not be that noteworthy, but they're the ones that are pulling the strings behind the scenes for budget policies. They're having closed door meetings. They're having meetings that are not even considered meetings. I'm back here now. I'm seeing a lot of this stuff. They already know these people. They're having lunches. They're seeing each other out, not even on purpose. It's this networking thing, right? Where they all know they're going to be at certain events. And so I didn't even plan to see so-and-so here. He was just happened to be here. And then we had this conversation that solidified a deal. And now he's got the RFP, right? Like it's a whole like inside baseball type of mentality and culture, again, that you have to dismantle. Dismantle, right? We want things happening out in the open. We want community accountability. We want language and terms that include everyone. We want representation that that represents all of our students and all of our community members, right? Like some of these things that are pretty standard. And I think oftentimes too, we think, oh, everybody feels that way. There's some crazy ones that are the most vocal, and they're the ones taking positions of power because they know their views are marginal. They know their views are marginal, so they want to make sure that they can maintain a marginal culture. And so they fight for the positions of power to be able to. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but like
that's all right. I mean, you kind of grasp everything, and you're just like, okay, maybe I'll start here to fix it. Oh no, well maybe I'll start here to fix it. And no, well maybe it's just such an overwhelming.
It's a layered problem. It's a layered problem.
Yeah, it's a layered problem.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But we've got BLOC out there trying to fix, some elements of it. But we started with the leadership lab. I'm cutting off here because I want to make sure.
Yeah, leadership lab, right.
What else do you do at BLOC? Because I want to make sure we talk about.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure I talk about BLOC.
So the BLOC building program is, like I said, our monthly meetups that we create professional development that's like a FUBU mindset for Black men, by Black men. This year's series of development is actually built around Kendrick Lamar's album, The Big Morale and the Big Steppers, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. So each of those songs kind of creates a different theme that then creates a professional development that's specific for Black men. Those professional development spaces are just for Black men. We try to keep them safe and brave for those perspectives to be able to grow and to develop on their own. The BLOC building, the fellowship program, like I said, they have a 2-year learning experience where they get assigned a mentor, they get assigned an instructional coach. We have very specific learning experiences for them that's attuned to what they need and their own classroom observations and their own data. They get the money to go back and seek another degree, right? One of the biggest issues, like we talked about before, Black men get out of education because they don't get paid enough and they can't afford to go back and get another degree. And so if we can help them get over that hump, right? We can get you the master's, we can get you your EDD, we can get you your EDS, as long as you commit to using it. Well, you already use ED, so you commit to using it inside education, and that helps us build that pipeline toward those leaders that we're talking about, the liberatory leaders, right? And we call them liberatory. It's not liberatory, it's technically not a word. Every time I type it in the Microsoft Word, it gives me a red line underneath it, right? But right, we know how Microsoft Word, right? Sharif El-Mekki, one of my mentors in Philadelphia, says this a lot, that the most revolutionary thing you can do is educate Black kids well. And when we start to think about education as a liberatory mechanism, as a tool towards Black futurism, right? Not as a sequence of oppressive measures that we've experienced, right? That's the first step towards getting kids to think about being educators. School, when you become a grown-up, won't be school like you have it now. That's like literally the very first thing that I say to kids, right? Because now kids like, oh, no shit, I hate it here, right? Like, I bet you do, kid. There's a reason why you do hate it here. Like, I hated it here, right? Like, schools haven't changed in 100 years, right? And so what can you do to make sure that schools are different in 20 years, right? In 30 years, or 40 years. The next 50 years in the Black community is going to be massive. I think we have huge opportunities in front of us, right?
I truly feel it.
And education is just the precipice of that. So the liberatory leaders kind of gets leaders to start to think about, what does it mean to not just be a leader in the traditional sense, but to lead in a again, Black futurism, this idea of a life outside of white dominant culture. Block building, liberatory leaders, Acoma and Toso, and we do equity school improvement, right? So we're not gonna send no Black men into a building that's oppressive, right? So we do diversity, equity, inclusion with all districts and with all schools. So if you're a white person out there right now that's thinking, man, I'd love to work with Block, but I'm not a Black male, that's the way you can do it. You can contact us to see if possibly your district is interested in forming a partnership that would give you all the unique perspective of a Black male consultant in your district and in your building, right? As the most underrepresented in education, it's a rare commodity to be able to have a bunch of PhD Black male consultants that you have access to. You're welcome, right? Like, call BLOC and
there you go.
You can get somebody in your building that is either locally or nationally, right? That has already put in place a modem of change for your building, your district, to be more equitable for all teachers, but especially Black men.
Awesome. I love it. Now, before I close, because I've taken up more of your time than I expected. Sorry about that. This, and you kind of alluded to some of this before, but the whole theme of today is we want to get more Black men into the field of education. And I think we can start that process at a younger age. And I know for me as a Black female, and I'm thinking any female of any color, I can remember or imagine, like in elementary school, if I took a leadership role, if I helped out a fellow student in math or whatever, the teacher would say, oh, you're very good at that, Lana. You should pursue a career in education or teaching. I feel like that would be said to me, and that's being said to young girls. Why is that not being said to Black boys? And what do we need to do to get teachers to kind of stimulate that at such a young age?
First of all, they need to be more Black men teaching them, right? Genius, game recognized game, genius recognized genius, right? If I don't have any access to that level of vibration, I have a hard time seeing it. I was literally saying the other day, some of our babies coming to school shining so damn bright that these teachers can't handle it. I don't recognize that vibration. You must need an IEP.
My babies, okay.
I don't recognize your brilliance. You need to sit down.
Gotcha.
You need to calm down. You need to go sit in another area.
I see.
Because we just different, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. My babies are different. Yes. Indeed.
And so, yes, absolutely. We need more Black men recognizing that in Black boys. But you're right. We can't do it by tomorrow. So cross boundaries of difference, right? Think outside of yourself. I always tell people, don't let your first thought be your last thought. If you're uncomfortable, your second thought should be why. Not like respond, right? I'm uncomfortable, jump. No, like uncomfortable, where is that coming from? Okay. Who taught me where this discomfort arises? Where is this discomfort in my body, right? Mindfulness. Where is there tightness in my stomach? Are my feet tingly? Are my hands sweaty? Is my heart racing? Is my mouth dry, right? What are my actual triggers? Now let's think back to what did this student do to trigger me?
Gotcha, okay.
Right? Because maybe it's not about, it's not about the student, it's about you, right? And when we're able to sift through our triggers, our physiological responses, when we're able to be aware of where those prejudices and biases come from, we can now start to reconstruct again, reimagine, rebuild what our archetype looks like, right? Even in your example, I, as a student, was helping another person, and then I got identified as a good teacher. What if a good teacher isn't always the person that's helping, it's the person that's in the front of the room making the most noise? What if a good teacher is the one that all the kids gravitate to, even if he ain't doing nothing, right? What if a good teacher is the one that's rapping in the corner and got all the kids around him?
Gotcha.
Jonesing on other kids, cracking on other kids, right? What if that's what a great teacher is?
True.
So even if we start to shift our archetype as a what makes a great teacher, what are these characteristics? I had a conversation with the previous school district. Just because they had a superintendent just tell me this, just because we've learned this in our couple of years doing this program, just because you're a great teacher don't mean you're a great mentor. What are the actual skills that we're looking for here that are transferable across different lines of difference, right? Or different careers, right? Or different affinities, right? Your kid may be quiet, but they draw really well. How are you able to take that talent, cultivate that talent, and see an educator in that kid, right? And be able to say, well, you have some room to grow in this public speaking area, but even I just defined all great teachers as public speakers and extroverts. That's not true. My own bias was just showing there, right? That's not true. There are great teachers that are introverts, that are highly skilled, that have growth areas in communication, right? And so where can we start looking for, you said it earlier too, highly functioning, highly functioning people, right? That have a lot of success, or that have a lot of, I'm trying to not use biased language, highly functioning people that recognize the value in education, that you can then start to turn back towards education and not just towards a career for themselves. Unfortunately, like that's how I try to turn it to bully kids, right? You want to be an engineer, you can make money for yourself, come give back to the community, right? Like come be a teacher. Like, oh damn, Miss Ellis, never thought about it like that. You don't care about your future, you don't care about kids, right? Like that's a great way to guilt kids into teaching.
I know, right? All righty, sir. Well, like I said, I apologize. I've taken up more time than I was expected. I'm gonna do my random question.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is the best part.
Yeah, and then if I could trouble you to tell us how we connect with you and everything like that. I saw you guys had a fundraiser recently. Maybe we can all.
Yeah, we had a masquerade ball on Saturday, girl. It was lit.
Yeah, maybe we can show up for the next.
According to the kids, I ain't gonna cap. It was lit. Look, somebody out there is giving me a round of applause right now. Somebody 25 and younger.
All right. What's one item on your bucket list?
I'm gonna go skydiving.
Yes, please do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't ride a roller coaster, but I'll jump out of a plane.
Adrenaline rush. Awesome.
I don't see how that adds up.
Teach the kids ain't enough adrenaline for you.
Girl, adrenaline not the right word for it. It's just straight drama. It's just straight up drama. And it ain't even just always the kids. Sometimes the kids be the relief.
Yeah,
Hey, you know,
you know,
it's
it
the
is
adults.
rewarding and stressful. I can just imagine all kinds of emotions packed into one. You know,
All in one day. Yes, all in
all
one
in
day.
one day.
Jimmy V said it
No day
once.
is the same. No day is the same.
If you can laugh, if you can cry, and you can be, if you can think all in one day, you lived a good day. And teaching every day, you get all three of those.
And you know, I mean, what would we do without you guys? I mean, I just, you know, I think that's the first thing people need to really understand is,
Right.
you know, all the teachers just said, hey, you know what? We don't want to do it no more. Where would we be?
Now what? Now
Now,
what y'all gonna do? Who gonna, and we found out during COVID, who gonna take your little badass Johnny? Because you be dropping him off with us.
so many parents are like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. What do you know? Like, what?
Throwing your hands up at parents. I ain't never seen so many parents at parent conference. He does the same thing at home. What you mean he does the same thing at home? Look, don't get me started because I love parents. I'm a parent myself.
Tell us how we connect with you, how we show up for the next function and all of that stuff. How do we?
So the BLOC is spelled BLOC. So go to the BLOC, BLOC, KC for Kansas City.org. Okay. And if you're in the local area, in the Midwest area, or if you want to come into town for one of our events, just reach out to me. You can contact us through the email. You can donate through the email, or I'm sorry, through the website. You can contact through the website. You can see our upcoming events through the website. We have a big event this spring. Liberated 2 is our second biannual conference that we really highlight the work that Black men are doing across the country in terms of education. So I'm sure there'll be some folks from Dr. Travis Bristol is a good friend of mine. Dr. Chris Emden is a good friend of mine. He's at USC now. So
okay.
You should definitely reach out to him. Tell him I sent you. And
all right, I will do. And real quick before we go, because I'm looking at your shirt, please tell us what your logo means. I read that before, but please tell us what your logo means.
So BLOC, Brothers Liberating Our Communities, and then the B, and then the L, and the O, and the C, I think. So you can really only kind of see the arrow if you're gonna look at it, right? Like the block is in the negative space, but it's inspired by Western Adinkra language. So Akoma and Toso, like I said earlier, is our fellowship, and that's the X is inspired by that's that symbol, Akoma and Toso, which means linked hearts. So this idea of a fence, Iban is the other inspired logo material here. So our guy that designed our logo used those two thoughts and mindsets, and as we use linked hearts to provide and create a fence and provide security around our communities, and around our children, our babies, right?
Our future.
Yeah.
There you go. That's it. Well, sir, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of your community of brothers. I'm just so proud of the work that you guys are doing. I just, from below me, I mean, just.
Thank you so much.
Keep doing. That's all for this week. That's all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I'll see everybody next time.